I'm especially excited about our next panel because it is the second program from Asia Society Southern California's Asian Women Empowered, or AWE initiative, of which I'm a proud committee member. Through programming, mentorship, and research, AWE will harness the power of Asian women globally to invest in and empower in the next generation. I personally spent much of my career in entertainment as the only Asian woman in the room, so I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce our next panel featuring Asian women entertainment decision makers whose roles shape what audiences across the country and the globe watch on TV. Here to introduce our panelists and to moderate the conversation is Piya Sinha-Roy.
Hi everyone, I'm Piya Sinha-Roy, your moderator tonight, and I'm so excited to host this panel. I've been a journalist in this town for 10 years, and first of all, I'm just so happy to be here at a summit like this for AAPI talent, and I'm really, really excited to talk to these three incredible ladies who are doing amazing things. So I'm going to introduce them up one by one. First up, we have Gloria Fan. She's the head of current series at Disney Branded TV. Gloria, please come up. She's doing all the fun shows. Next up, we have Emily Furutani. She's the director of comedy development at Universal TV. Hi, Emily. And last but not least, Jeniffer Kim, the senior vice president of international originals at HBO Max. Hi.
Hello.
We were just saying that none of us had ever, I don't think you three had met each other before today, right?
First time.
How is this possible? I'm so glad you're all here. You should all definitely know each other.
And well, I was just saying how I'm kind of excited that I'm getting to meet, fellow Asian Americans, but because it means that there's so many more of us,
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm like, wait, how come we have not met before?
We're out here.
Exactly.
So what I want to kick off with is, obviously, each of you are at these incredible networks doing amazing things. So what I'd love to kick off with is, for each of you, what has been your biggest achievement so far in your current role in terms of discovering AAPI and underrepresented voices? And we can start off with Jennifer right here.
Oh gosh, okay. It's hard to think of like one specific kind of achievement, but I think maybe most recently, we were just talking about before we got on stage, I developed a show called Starstruck on HBO Max, and it has two AAPI leads, really, a South Asian and an AAPI female lead. And it's one of those things where we went through kind of the development process and we had ideas of what the leading man should look like. And just kind of through the series of, events with people falling out, we got this incredible actor of South Asian descent from the UK who is a friend of yours. And it is quite amazing to have, that resonate. And interestingly enough, like just reading kind of the social media kind of chatter and like people just commenting constantly, at least in the US, like how refreshing it is to see a leading man who's playing this movie star that you kind of always think of as, your prototypical kind of classic, non-diverse leading man. And so having Nikesh as the lead was, I think, just something pretty, even in our world, pretty monumental, because you don't see that often, and I know that you don't see that often in the UK. And so it was something that was really kind of gratifying for us to be able to do that and to create a space where, people are actually reacting in such a positive way, like, wow, two leads in a show that are not, your typical kind of white leads. And that's really on the creator Rose as well, who is of API descent, and just kind of really putting out, the opportunity to also cast, somebody diverse. So I would say that's kind of one of the, personally that I'm excited about, just because it's like a passion project of mine.
I know, I absolutely love Starstruck. And it is wild that my friend is the co-lead in it, and season 2 is coming very soon, so I'm excited.
We just finished production and post.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's coming soon.
Great. Emily, how about you?
In my job in comedy development, it's really great because I'm able to be entrepreneurial. And so oftentimes I can, take generals with writers or creators and they'll just start with a germ of an idea. And that's kind of something that had happened. I had met with a young Asian American actress, kind of a lot of things. But she came to me and she said, I have a very specific idea for a show. And what I liked about it was not only was it relatable, but it also had a lot of nuance to the Asian American experience, one that I've never seen before, but one that I have experienced myself. Excuse me.
We'll keep doing that the whole time.
And I really resonated with this gem, and I started talking to all the producers that we have on our roster at Universal Television, and one of them, they really took to it. And I think what was so great about it is because it is relatable. Sure, it's about, her story is about being Japanese American, but really what it is about, it's about sisterhood, it's about mother-daughter relationships. And so being able to kind of put that together was something that really made me proud, only because it's the first time that I will hopefully be able to see myself reflected on TV, but knowing that it is something that is relatable enough that other people, producers, were really welcome to the idea.
Yeah, and that's why we love having you in the rooms. It's the best part. Gloria, tell me about your pick.
Definitely I could talk about a few projects that I'm so incredibly excited about. Disney branded television, we're about to do, American Born Chinese. It's based on Jean Yang's book, and Destin is going to be directing.
So excited.
Couldn't be more excited, and there's, other stories that we have in development throughout, but I also wanted to take a moment of saying, I don't know if I've done it yet, meaning I feel like we're still on the precipice, and I kind of look forward to being able to say that Starstruck came out. By the way, I loved it. It was so great. And it's how can we kind of get past it? Because admittedly, so many things that I'm so in love with are still in development. And so for me, it's like, how do we change it so that we could look back and say, yes, this came out and that came out. And maybe the time is now, and hopefully, even a year from now, we're able to say, have a longer list. So when you ask the question of what's the biggest accomplishment, I still see it in the future.
Okay, that's good. It definitely feels like, you guys are just kind of, there's so much more to what you're all doing. So I'm excited to revisit this question down the line as well. What are some of the biggest obstacles that each of you have faced in the process of ushering in some of these diverse stories?
Well, I guess I'll start with that, because this is almost the B side of what I was just talking about, is that I feel like there's definitely a robust development of all these great AAPI stories. But how do you get from development to actually made? I still see a lot of obstacles. And oftentimes we are still pitching to people who, don't have a shorthand. For example, if you were to pitch a story that is about the all-American family, then you're able to kind of shorthand it of doing all these shortcuts of like, the family's eating a great dinner. But when you tell it, okay, so I'll speak to myself of it being a Chinese family, I have to explain, well, this is what the dinner consists of, and you're kind of finding yourself still over explaining, and there isn't that shorthand or that leap of faith, that trust. So to me, one of the obstacles is how can we just earn that leap of faith to say, we're gonna tell it and you're gonna love it.
I think to add to that too, I think on the other side of development, I did comedy development prior to this job. It's also like staffing, and finding opportunities and staffing the writer's room, the directors, to be, from this community, because I think otherwise you're not training them and they're not learning in the way that I think you want to be taught. And so development is great. Like there's so much development, but then number one, getting it off into order a series, but then also the people who are show running it and who are staffed in it, whether it's an Asian kind of show or non-Asian show. Even non-Asian shows, like you want to make sure you're kind of casting the writer's room full of people of different backgrounds, because that's the way we're, that's the way the world is. So
Yeah.
I think it's also just to add is to it's essential to start staffing inside the room. Doesn't matter what show it is,
Yeah.
so that you're training kind of the next gen voices. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Emily?
Yeah, you both hit it really well. I was going to say kind of a combination of that. But I also think, the industry has made a turn for, I would say, the better within the past couple years. Diverse stories maybe were a thing a couple years ago, but they are definitely a thing now. And I think that's all to say it's very competitive. And I think that's great because there's so many people that want to tell their stories and should tell their stories. So I think, as I'm putting together a project, I want to make sure it hits those, kind of what I had mentioned in my previous answer, which is stories that are relatable. People, can learn about our culture without it being shoved down their throat. I think there's different ways that we have to be really smart about putting together a package because everybody's trying to do it. So how are we going to stand out?
Well, going off that point, currently, what kind of stories or creators are standing out to you right now? What are you seeing out there? And is there anyone in particular who is particularly impressing you, whether they're on your roster or somewhere else?
I'll say for me, Teresa Shao is a standout. And I say that because Nora from Queens is one of my favorite shows at the moment, but it captures an Asian American experience without it being about an Asian American experience.
Yeah.
And there's all these conversations of well, who, have you ever seen yourself on TV? Yes or no? And I feel like I've finally seen myself in this Nora character. And so the fact that she's able to create, or based on Awkwafina, but this character that is relatable to me, but also is kind of goofy and funny, but unapologetic, I think is so great. And at the same time, it's hilarious. So
And I will just add about Teresa. I worked with her when I covered a show called American Dad, which is an animated show. And 20 men, I think. She was the one or two women on it and just really held her own. So she's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would just say, for me, the showrunner of one of my shows, it's called Made for Love. It's not an Asian American show, but it is on HBO Max. And the showrunner is Asian American named Christina Lee, who is a friend, but also is just, super, not only a brilliant writer, but really kind of walks the talk. And I think that's the thing that is so kind of rare to find right now, when everyone's telling you, do it this way. And she's like, no. I want to hire diverse, even if below the line. It's important to me, and she'll stand her ground and not kind of oh, it's COVID, we need to get going, and kind of get pushed against the wall. But she really believes in what she's trying to do and make change within her kind of community, which is the set of the show. And I think that's really admirable. Beyond kind of telling these stories, which are important, it's also how you conduct yourself on set and how you are setting the stage for everybody who's looking at you in the crew. And I think that's really important. So she's doing that, and it's really admirable to see someone just kind of not go against it and just, to go against kind of the norm and to do what she believes in. And that's hard to do when everyone's telling you kind of, you can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Gloria?
Gosh, there was just so many people that I wanted to talk about, and I was thinking, I wanted to kind of highlight some of the people who, to piggyback off of what you're saying, when we're building a room together, there are so many great, AAPI writers who have been just waiting for their moment. And just to highlight a few, I remember Jenny Lin, who's just a fantastic writer and creator. And, I remember when I was talking to the showrunner, Elgin James, of Mayans, and, definitely Mayans is about this, very masculine, Mexican, motorcycle gang that came from the Kurt Sutter world of Sons of Anarchy. And I remember Elgin saying, yes, definitely we want to have a very, true Latin experience. But he's like, at the same time, I want to fill the room with people who come from different places, who have their own definition of other. And it doesn't have to be just that room. And how do we kind of create that diverse? And I remember introducing him to Jenny Lin, and immediately they hit it off. And they couldn't have come from different places, but in that difference, there was also similarity. So, and Jenny before that, she, had been part of Joss Whedon's camp,
Yeah.
and working with also going up the ranks of Rita Mamoon. And there was a time where, and look, I don't want to tell her story, she deserves to tell it herself, but she also was one of those writers where she was being asked to be a certain level writer over and over. And again, I'm excited that we're finally shedding light to it and that we're calling on it and we're changing things. But there are a lot of writers who have been, doing this for 10 plus years that kind of got stuck in that, and it's exciting to see finally it's more out, we're talking about it, and we're exacting change.
Yeah. Well, going off this, one of the biggest challenges I've certainly seen when covering this industry for the last decade is a lot of the problem in increasing representation seems to come down to the discovery and nurturing of diverse voices, and I'm just wondering how each of you have approached being able to find and help incubate and build up these voices that we so desperately need.
Well, I'll start. Because my life in international has only been a few years, I'm going back to kind of when I did traditional development, is we would come up with these programs, right? Diversity programs, which the effort was good. The conceit of it was great and the intention was great, but it never really achieved what it was supposed to do, is to create these, great future writers. And so when I was kind of coming up, it was always just like me going out and finding and reading, and like whether it's authors or articles or just kind of other pieces of material out there, just kind of putting it on myself to just help discover and always refer to other Asian American executives and the few that I knew, and it would be like, you need to read this person, or like continue to do that, because otherwise you were just like, they would go into these programs and it would just be a black hole and it would never really amount, at least the programs that I've seen. And now I'm in international, it's such a different space because there is a lot of diversity in that, because we're now telling different cultural stories from different communities, but like specifically in the UK, it's a very diverse community. And so there too, we're always trying to tap in, and we're in the middle of trying to create international programs within different regions, because we're so not connected to these regions being in the US. So it's just really being proactive and taking the initiative and just trying to talk to other fellow people who have the same belief, and sharing kind of the pool of people, and constantly, like, can you hire this person? Like, I've got a great director. Doing a lot of that, I think, is helpful.
Well, what I love about also the community, where it's the opposite of like mine, it's ours, like, and there's an excitement of sharing, because in a way it doesn't matter if it's that we feature, like they could be part of, let's say, Disney's program, but if they get their break over at HBO or somewhere, it's like you see the enthusiasm and the excitement because we just want their voices to be heard. And it is, so that's something that I commend this group, is there is truly that sharing and that communication.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that too, and it's nice to be able to reference people who you trust, to say, who do you love?
Yeah.
For me, I make it known to everybody that I'm talking to, reps, other writers, other creators, who are the people that you love? This is what I want to do, so please know that I am a resource, come to me, and let's figure something out. So I kind of have this approach of just trying to be helpful, and kind of, if I'm talking to, let's say, an Asian American writer, I feel like a lot of executives kind of run on this track, and then we also have writers and creators that run in another. But I like to be the person that's like, how can we all work together? How can I kind of bridge this gap? Because I'm sure they have a lot of questions, whether it's what are your mandates? What are the things that people are looking for? And so I think it's like, as soon as I do identify that person, I try to build the relationship, figure out who I can set them up with, whether that's internal, whether that's external, just so they can, be exposed.
Yeah.
Well, one last thing that I'd want to add is how I feel like as we grow up in executives, we grew up in a time where we kind of made fun of, my brothers, sisters, like, and you're like, oh. But I almost feel like we need to be the opposite, because in a way, I remember growing up where, I didn't have any relatives or friends or family that are in the business, and I do feel like being kind of in a underrepresented community, many of them don't have that or that relationship. And so I almost feel like we have to kind of encourage those like, oh yes, I will take that meeting, from my brothers, sisters, friends, cousin,
Right.
whatever, because that might be the closest thing, just simply because we don't have that robust decades of oh yeah, my uncle works there, that nepotism. I guess.
Well, I think that's what makes networks so important. It's what's so great about all of us being here tonight in the same room, and I hope that continues to build. The one thing that I have felt like can be a little bit of a deterrent in some ways as new content comes along, there's a buzzword in this town, and it is IP, right? Everyone is looking for franchise, and everyone's looking for their own. And so often when IP is developed, it isn't necessarily being developed by very diverse voices. So for each of you, how are you all approaching IP and looking at it to be more inclusive?
For us, comedy, we have a bit of a different relationship with IP as opposed to drama. But we still love IP. Mm-hmm. But if we're looking for IP, we're looking for diverse IP.
Right.
And so, for example, there was a format based in Australia, Asian Australian format, and that's something that we're going to do for the U.S.
Okay.
So it's like, I feel like there are all these different avenues that you can try to do, but sure, of course, I think there's as you were saying, the big things, it's a little bit different, but for what we're doing, we're just going to go after those diverse stories and those diverse formats. We have another project that is kind of, I would say, loosely based off of IP, but let's cast diverse. Let's cast the writers' room diverse. So that's kind of how we like to approach it. Let's just do it.
Yeah. Well, Gloria, for you at Disney, which is home of IP, how are you approaching that?
I could truly talk out of both sides of my mouth, so I guess I will. So on one side, yes, IP couldn't be more important. And I remember personally literally just traveling through the world, especially through Asia, going, to Goa, India, to Tokyo, to, and talking to even publishers. I remember that there was this beautiful story that we had set up where it was based on a Japanese novella that had never been translated before, and it was that kind of IP. But on the flip side, also on Disney, and I kind of wanted to shine a light on Disney Channel. For Disney Channel programming, most of it is not based on IP. From, you think of from High School Musical to Bunked to, Raven's Home. These are great shows that really are original and have created, and so there is kind of a balance where maybe what it is just, what's the voice, And I think even when we look for IP, it is, what is that voice that's being shown? And I think it could be said about things that are not based and that are original too.
Yeah. And Jennifer, for you, I know you're working mainly with internationals, but how are you sort of approaching IP?
We kind of approach it in that, part of Warner Media, there's so much IP within the company. And,
I've heard of a few.
And looking within, where we have opportunity, there's a specific brand that we're looking at that we're really trying to kind of exploit internationally because it's historically known as more of a domestic IP. Mm-hmm. And so that's an opportunity to start to create, more of those, extensions in different regions and different cultures, which just naturally kind of speaks to creators that are up and coming from those regions that we would hope are, voices that haven't been tapped into yet, and then a combination of voices that have been tapped into. So we have, great deep IP, within the company, so it's tapping into that. I think on the other side of it is looking at external IP too. I mean, we look at a lot of books. They're not always big franchises, but they are tried and true books coming from different countries. And so we look at that and does it have resonance around the world beyond that region? So I think that's something that we really look at and is important because in the age of global television, I think people are very open to watching any kind of show, and especially if it's based on a book that's a beloved book, I think people will be invested.
We love a good adaptation.
Yeah.
So finally, looking ahead for each of you, what are you each personally hoping to be able to see more of from AAPI and in general BIPOC and underrepresented voices?
I mean, I'm going to be obvious. It's just more representation on screen and off screen. I mean, that's at the end of the day, it's just seeing more of that and finding creators, who are out there and haven't had a chance yet, and just plugging into them, but also continuing to grow up the next generation of writers in rooms that historically they just have not been invited to, and I just would love to see more of that.
Love that.
Yeah.
Emily, for you?
I think for me, it's more Asian American comedies. What's an Asian American family comedy? We haven't had one in a few years, and I want to see more of them, because I feel like there's so many conversations that we are having one-on-one, we're having with our friends, we're having with our family. I've never seen that on TV, and I'd love to be able to work on something like that.
Yeah, I love that. How have we not had this yet, by the way?
I think there have
Fresh
been,
off the boat, obviously.
Yeah,
There's a couple, but like I'm still waiting for like the South Asian version.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Let's see. I guess this might be a little controversial, but I promise that I don't have the answer, and I want to kind of propose dialogue and conversation, because I'm so curious, and that is, I am so excited that we're Asian, and I look, this is the Asia society. And then on this, but then we also are so different too, may it be Southeast Asian, Japan, Korea, China, there's so how do we kind of find the great balance of promoting great big Asian voices, but at the same time not cannibalizing each other either, when we're kind of seeking for authenticity, which is incredibly important, but at the same time it's like, okay, well, if this is a story about a particular region, can we still hire from outside that region? And at what point have we kind of went too far one side, and on the other hand, stay true and authentic? I'm still struggling and figuring out what that is. And hopefully, we could do it together, because I do want to do what's best and what's right for that particular project.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think given we're seeing this very interesting shift that's been happening for the last few years, that finally the remake of international shows are being pushed aside more for the originals now, because of streaming platforms, because of more awareness, and the fact that the biggest show in America right now is Squid Game. And obviously that means that we're going to go into every exec now is looking for the next Squid Game, which is maybe an issue.
I'm sure we've gotten all the new scripts and treatments.
Everyone wants a hybrid of Ted Lasso and Squid Game.
Oh, God.
Oh my God. I don't know how that's
Really?
Apparently, those are the two most popular shows, and everyone wants that hybrid. I don't know how that's going to look, but it's going to be interesting. But yeah, how do you kind of, what are you sort of seeing in terms of, the awareness of more original creators coming from the outside of America and coming here and being able to kind of bring their stories authentically and not having to worry about getting Americanized in any way?
I mean, that's what my
This is what
main
you
focus is really telling global stories, no matter where it's from and no matter what language it is in, to be able to, bring that to an American audience, essentially, but also just kind of the wider platform. And I think, what Netflix has done has been amazing. It's just really paved the way for these international stories to be told. So that's kind of our goal too. And the focus is always just tapping in and finding the best creators in those regions to create those stories. So it is absolutely essential right now to do it and to continue on to do it.
Yeah. Have either of you seen any of that, or?
I think, we do work domestically and we do work internationally, because we do have a lot of shows on, all the different platforms, Netflix, Amazon, HBO Max, et cetera, et cetera. So I haven't really thought about it in that sense. However, I think it is something that I'm often very focused on the US, because that's our main market. But at the same time, I also feel like the U.S. needs to see other international points of view as well. So I think that's definitely something to consider while not diluting it, because we want to, make sure that we're keeping that message alive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for us, for Disney, is definitely a very global, international brand. So it's exciting that there is kind of that openness. And to me, I just think the industry in general, meaning like one of your first questions about some of the obstacles. And now as we kind of finish up, I look with everything with like a sense of optimism, because I still remember when I was going to Hong Kong Film Art or the Busan Film Festival, and I'm meeting with all these great storytellers that are from different countries, and I was like, so can we make this all in English and cast all American people? You okay with that? Like, I was asking that because that was what was asked of the time. So now I am excited. There has been progress, like what you're saying, Emily, that things are changing. And now I don't need to say that. I don't need to say, can we change it this way? It'd be like, great, this sounds good, let's do it.
Absolutely.
So I end with optimism.
That is a great note to end on. Gloria, Emily, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.